right, so my name is Clara, and there's some newer faces, which is really awesome, and it's nice to meet you all. I am by profession a marriage and family therapist, and that maybe kind of ties into this talk a little bit. But what I will share with you kind of right off the bat, because actually even the title of the talk is not what I saw put on Instagram as the title of the talk. So that's all good. Like, so if you're expecting something a little different, like it's all good. We'll see where this goes. But my heart is that we're actually having somewhat of a conversation together. Like, I don't want to just like throw slides at you and it not have any real intersection with your life, with your relationships, with the things that matter to you. And why I shared that I'm a marriage and family therapist is that when I thought about becoming a therapist, I really thought like I'd just be helping people with like the stuff that they were like going through, and a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of depression, whatever. And kind of like totally missed the fact that being a marriage and family therapist would have a lot to do with relationships. And wouldn't you know, life is really complicated when you are not thinking just about yourself, okay? And when there's other people in the mix, and now you're thinking about not just how this person is thinking and behaving and the way that they live their life, but now here's another person in this dynamic. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. And so as you can see from the slide, it says to date or not to date. And yes, it's actually not the question, but it is something that we think about the right way to date. And the topic was really more about relationships, kind of then turning it more towards dating and romantic relationships. And so we'll get there as we go. But I thought it would be important for us to not be able to change the slide. Okay, got it. Okay. I want to ask why relationships actually matter. Okay. So we know we're built for relationships, right? We know it's not good for men and women, man/women, to be what? Alone. Like when God said it's not good for man to be alone, as in humankind, humanity, he really meant it. Like it's not good for us to be alone. And not only that, God within himself exists as a relationship. We know God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit it's a trinity. It's a relationship, right? And so we were built by a God who exists in relationship for relationships, okay? Now, what I think is really, really fascinating is some of the psychology that goes behind why relationships actually matter. And some of this is a little bit old data, but like there's still really cool statistics that I want to share with you guys. So the first one, if your best friend eats healthy, you are 5 times more likely to have a healthy diet yourself. And a huge study a while back, showed that there's a nearly 60% increase in the risk of obesity among people whose friends gained weight. Okay? So why does that matter? Like the people around you, their choices, they impact your choices. And it's not like someone consciously says, like, I'm going to gain weight now, right? Like nobody decides that they're going to start eating unhealthy. It's like, no, the people that you're with, the way that you think about the world, the way that you interact with your relationships, of course, it all matters. Those who say they have no real friends at work have only a 1 in 12 chance of feeling engaged in their job. On the other side, conversely, if you have a best friend at work, you're 7 times more likely to feel engaged in your job. Okay. So if you go to work and you like the people that you work with, guess what? You like your job a little bit more. Doesn't sound like rocket science, right? So it changes the way you actually work, changes the way you actually engage with your environment, because the people that are around you, your relationships, they matter. Okay. A 10-year-old, like a 10-year-old study found that older adults with a large circle of friends were 22% less likely to die during the period of that study, so during that 10-year period, than those with fewer friends. So within those 10 years, you actually had more of a chance to survive, okay, to live, if you had what? More friends. Come on, we can talk, right? More friends, relationships. I'm just going to keep giving you more so you're convinced that relationships matter. Then you're going to be like, okay, we get it, okay? So in a study of nearly 3,000 nurses with breast cancer, They found that women without close friends were 4 times more likely, rather, that should say, to die from the disease as women with 10 or more friends. Okay. So you can go through really hard things, even physiologically, when you have what? Relationships, friends, people in your life. Okay. Okay. So relationships, what? They matter. Okay. And then this is my favorite. This is the last one I'll share with you guys. So I just think like psychologically, this is so cool. Okay. Researchers studied 34 students at the University of Virginia a while back. Okay. And they took them to the base of a steep hill and fitting them with a weighted backpack. Okay. So they put on a backpack that had like weights in it. They were then asked to estimate the steepness of that hill. Some participants stood next to friends during the exercise while others stood alone. The students who stood with their friends gave lower estimates of the steepness of the hill, and the longer the friends had known each other, the less steep the hill appeared. How cool is that, right? Like you have people next to you and you have people that have walked through life with you. And then like, guess what? Life doesn't seem so hard. Your challenges don't seem so overwhelming because you have relationships. And relationships, what? They matter. Okay, so are we all convinced? Relationships, what? They matter. Now, no relationship will matter more than the person that you choose to spend the rest of your life with. Okay, and this is our transition, right? So your friends matter. Pick good friends. Be a good friend. Okay, absolutely. Okay, now we transition a little bit more into the kind of insight that I'm hoping we can take. And again, this is where I'm like just going to pray that you guys are brave enough to share your thoughts, ask your questions, because I don't want it, again, to be like theoretical knowledge that sits in our heads, but I want it to, again, intersect with your lives, my life. Okay. And I should say, or I showed you a little slide and I went back. I should also say, I was talking to Maria. I don't know if this is my 17th or 16th year anniversary coming up. I should know, but in about 2 months, I will have been married for, oh gosh, I should really, if I was married in 2008, how long am I married? For those of you who are mathematicians, 17? Okay, thank you. So I will have been married for 17 years in just 2 months. So I can tell you, it really matters who you choose to spend your life with, okay? And by the grace of God, I can tell you I chose well, okay? Or he chose well, probably the better way of saying that. Okay, anyways. All right, so a brief timeline or history of relationships and dating and how God maybe put together marriage. Okay. Way Old Testament times. Okay. We did not have the, oh, you're so cute and I'd like to marry you. And I'm going to do like a 7-hour proposal extravaganza, right? Where I'm going to get a videographer and 50 of your friends who are waiting at the bottom of whatever scape thing I just created, and the balloons and the doves and all of that. Okay, that did not exist. Okay, in the Old Testament, okay, this is the period that I call, is that you, Rachel? And I'm going to give like major brownie points for anyone who gets this reference. Can anyone guess where this is from? It's really hard. Even my husband couldn't guess it. It's the guy that gets on time. No. You're already in a different direction. That's okay. No. But you might be thinking of something similar. Oh, yeah. The spies that go. No. But I appreciate the connections you're making. No, this is okay. A guy in the Old Testament who worked for 7 years for somebody. Does anyone remember who that is? No, it's Rachel. But but who's the guy? Who's the guy who worked for 7 years? Jacob. Okay, Jacob worked for 7 years, okay, to marry Rachel. He did think she was super cute, and her dad was like, you got to work for it. And he was like, all right, I'll do it. And he gets to his wedding night, gets into the tent where they are then supposed to consummate their marriage. And who does he find? Her sister. He finds Leah. It's really messed up. It's a messed up story. I'm not saying it because it's like prescriptive. Okay. But is that you, Rachel? No, it's not. Okay. That was marriage in the Old Testament. It wasn't okay for Rachel to be married until her older sister, Leah, was married. And he worked another 7 years for Rachel. Anyways, so if you were married to somebody you loved, that was great. But then you probably also had like 2 or 3 other wives. You had concubines, you had lots of things like, even though, okay, this was not God's plan and design for it, okay, marriage had a very different way of like being, right? Way back when. And then we kind of like transitioned into something you would maybe consider a little bit more sane, but it was very much this idea of like parental approval required, right? Like it wasn't like, oh, like I love you, you love me, let's get married, okay? There was definitely family involvement as it related to dating, to marriage. I mean, how dating didn't really exist, right? Like it was like, okay, arranged marriage, your family, our family, we get along, or your land looks pretty good, your daughter's not, you know, hideous or whatever. Like let's make it work, okay? And then you get several decades back. I know it's probably recorded. It's not great. Okay. Several years back, we have what we now call you can cheat, it's up there, the sexual revolution, right? Where women and men were basically like, yeah, we get to live our lives, we get to make our choices. We don't need to be in love to have sex, to live however, like their version of freedom played out, okay? And that really flipped everything over its head, right? Okay. We give you like a really brief history. We're missing like decades in all of this, but I'm just helping you track. Okay. And then the Christian community had kind of like this adverse reaction to it. Does anyone remember a guy named Joshua Harris and a book he wrote called I Kissed Dating Goodbye? Okay. So this is a little bit back before your time. This is huge. Look it up. Okay. And it's actually kind of sad because he had a lot of issues later on in life. But this guy, Joshua Harris, wrote this really famous book. It was called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. And the whole Christian community then kind of became like in an uproar of like, if you're holy, if you're godly, like then you don't date. You like do courtship, right? Like you court this person. You don't date the way that like, you know, Americans date or whatever. Okay. And if you date in an unhealthy and an ungodly way, then like you're not a Christian. Okay. And like, I feel like in a lot of ways, we're now at this period of like, now what? Okay. How do we get to know people? How do we, in recognizing that relationships matter, that who you are matters, who this person that you're considering matters, how do we do that process well? Okay. So that we choose somebody that enriches our lives, that is somebody that, as you and I are thinking about, is somebody that we want to, as we please God, as we think about what our futures are going to look like there's a real process to that. Do you all agree? Right? Like there has to be intentionality behind that. And it's not like what my parents would pick for me, and it's not the sexual revolution, and it's not I Kiss Dating Goodbye. Okay? It like none of those things work. Okay? So then what works? We get back to the beginning, because all of these things are the distortions of what was good and godly and what God created that then again got flipped upside down. And we know that in the very beginning, Genesis, and God says, therefore a man shall leave his wife and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. There was thoughtfulness and intentionality about what God created for dating, for marriage, and how you and I get to think about these things. Okay, so some questions that people have, like, again, and maybe you guys aren't asking these questions, like maybe for you, it's like, obviously I'm going to date if I'm going to marry. But for some people, they're really thinking like to date or not to date. When should I then start dating? Do I have to have the degree, the career, the house? Like at what level do I need to be ready before I start to date? And how do I do it the right way? Or if maybe you're already dating, like, am I with the right person, right? Like if you're already in a relationship, am I in the kind of healthy relationship that God wants me to be in? And what happens if I get it wrong? Because if you're dating, you would be very lucky that if the first person you are dating is the person you end up marrying. I mean, it happens, okay? That did not happen for me, but it happens for, I know several people in my life that is actually what happened, which is fantastic. It's amazing. But that might not be your experience. It certainly is not your experience if you've already dated and broken up with somebody, right? Like that ship has sailed. Okay, so then how do we get back to a place of it being good and healthy and godly? If at one point you didn't do it right or you didn't get it right. And by the way, I really want to push back like already on this idea that like there's no such thing as like damaged goods, right? Like if you dated in an unhealthy way, as we're talking about some of these principles that I'll share with you right now, if you're like, oh, like that piece wasn't there, or I wasn't thinking about this in the right way, that does not disqualify you and I from a healthy and godly relationship. Okay. So be very careful that as you hear me share what I believe are some really important considerations to have, that voice of like shame doesn't come over and kind of dial itself a little bit louder and distract from what it means for us to be thinking very, very thoughtfully about what's next for us, because that's like a trick of the devil. That's a lie, to then feel like you are somehow then like already off the mark. No, you can easily get back on track by God's grace. Okay. So we want to get the order right. And if you don't start with this right order, okay, and if you start with like getting to know somebody, for example, like if you start with the bottom, right, like getting to know this like potential partner, you've already gotten it backwards. And I would say like pause, halt. We need to get the order right. Okay. And the first order is knowing God, then knowing yourself, okay, knowing myself, and then we get to know other people and potentially then investigate what it is that we're actually looking for in our dating life. This is a really, really long quote. I'm not going to read the whole thing, especially because I want to also be mindful of your time. But this is a quote by St. John Chrysostom. Okay, he is a father in the Orthodox Church, and he speaks to the nature of man, of woman, okay, being something that God has deeply implanted in us, okay, for us to be attracted to one another, okay, for us to want relationship, like intimate, deep relationship. And from now on, because I know we started off talking about friendships and just relationships in general, but when I say relationship now, like I'll mean like the kind of relationship that will one day probably, like as we're thinking of like marriage, dating, those kinds of things. Like, so we're changing the kind of vernacular a little bit. Okay. So this is something that God intended. Like, this isn't like some dirty thing that humans did where it's like, oh, now all of a sudden we're like attracted to each other. And like, how do we like deal with that? It's like, no, this is how God created men, how God created women for sexual drive, for attraction, for all these things, obviously with boundaries, with a lot of things that, again, we'll talk about. But these are the things that, again, are God ordained and God given. Okay. And what we're ultimately in doing all of those things as we think about it in God's way, what we're building is something called the little church. Has anyone heard that concept before, that term before? Yeah. And so the little church is what your home, what my home should look like. Okay. There's the big church, like there's the church where you and I attend as the body of Christ. And then there's the little church in our homes. Okay. So that ultimately that intimate, deep desire, attraction, all of those beautiful things that God created lead to something that looks like a little church in our homes. Okay. So then as we know God, and we'll talk a little bit about having that relationship as kind of front and center in just a little bit. Okay. What does it then mean to know myself? So I'm going to kind of assume in some ways that like you and I are taking our relationship with God seriously. Okay. If that's something that we need to examine or thinking about a little bit differently, that's not kind of like the direction of our conversation, of our talk today. But there's some assumption that you're taking your spiritual life seriously. Okay. That you're intentional about knowing God more deeply. So then what does it mean to know yourself? Okay. And I know you guys have heard of this term over and over and over again. Okay. But a part of knowing yourself means knowing your boundaries. And when you guys hear the word boundaries, what do you hear? What do you think of? Yeah. What you're comfortable with, right? Like your own kind of lines that you draw for yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Your limits. Absolutely. Yeah. Very true. Anything else that you guys would add to that? I would say more generally, knowing your boundaries is also really about knowing like not just who you are, but like where you are and where you end and where another person is and where they end. Okay. And what I mean by that is recognizing that you are a person. I am a person with comfort level, whatever kind of things we'll talk about, like not just preferences and interests and all those things, but the things that you might be comfortable with or not comfortable with. But also, at what point, like, do you recognize, like, oh, this isn't my feeling, this is my thought, not this other person's feeling and this other person's thought. And knowing where you and I end, right, creates a healthy space, right? Especially when it comes to dating, okay? So that it's not two people who don't know where the first person begins and where that other person ends. And why we tend to have some of these conversations, not to say like we don't want to prepare, 12 and 13-year-olds to date, but a part of why it's hard. Hi, guys. Okay. A part of why it's really hard for a 12-year-old to have a really like successful dating relationship is because they actually don't know where they begin and where they end, right? And if you and I aren't full, mature, whole people, and then we invite someone into our life who, like, for whatever reason, like, is also not a whole, full, mature person, then what can that potentially create sometimes? Like, think with me. This is the part where I want us to kind of think some of these things together. Okay, it could become very toxic. In what way, though? Yeah. Beautiful. Yep. Yep. Oh my gosh. You like this thing? I love this thing. Okay. And all of a sudden, like, this person's likes, interests, their aversions become your aversions. And because you yourself haven't, and it's not like you're doing something wrong. It's not like you're intent. You wake up one day and you're like, I want to lose myself. I don't want to become a whole person. No, it's just the process that happens when you enter into a really deep, intimate space with somebody and you don't know where you begin and end and where this other person begins and ends, right? And so knowing yourself means, again, knowing your boundaries. And that's what makes it really easy then. Like, do you ever hear the phrase that no is a complete sentence? Okay. No is a complete sentence. Okay. When I don't have boundaries, I don't know myself. I need to if I'm doing something that, like, if you're doing something that makes me uncomfortable, for example, and I don't know myself, I don't know my boundaries, I don't have my voice, then like no can't be a complete sentence to me. I have to find other ways to make you happy. And then maybe I let this thing slide over here. And then all of a sudden, like, maybe you're in this dating relationship for like 2 or 3 years with somebody that like maybe you don't even actually like anymore. Okay. And that's really dangerous. Okay. Not just because you're wasting time, but because of what you're teaching yourself about who you are and your relationships in that process. Okay. So we'll get more to boundaries, but please ask questions and share your thoughts. It doesn't always have to be questions. Like, share with me your thoughts, your experiences, all the things that I think I'm hoping are on your mind. Okay. The other thing that's noteworthy when it comes to making sure that we know ourselves is, and this is from the book, by the way, you ever heard of Boundaries in Dating? Okay, I really, really, really recommend you get this book. His name is Dr. Henry Cloud, and his co-author is Dr. John Pouncey, but he's awesome. He has a book called Boundaries, which I also really recommend. You might have just heard of that book, Boundaries, but Boundaries in Dating is really, really good. It is like Christian-centered, it's faith-based, and he's awesome. Or if you like don't like to read, just like look up the YouTube videos of him like talking about this topic. If you want to save yourself several hours of reading, but please read it. Like, it's really packed and very, very practical. But what he says is like, no kids allowed. Okay. When it comes to dating, no kids allowed. Okay. And why does he say that? Because again, kids don't know their boundaries. They don't know who they are, right? So you have to be a mature, healthy adult before I even think about engaging in some of the most intimate, deep kinds of conversations of relating to each other, where there's quite a bit of vulnerability, quite a bit of potential for sexual boundaries to be crossed, intimacy to be crossed, all these things that when you're a kid, you just don't know any better. And you can't blame a kid for doing something that a kid doesn't know he or she should not be doing, right? So I'm not talking to any kids here, but it's really important for you to know there might be some parts of your life that are maybe a little underdeveloped and might require a little bit more maturity. And you might find that out after you have a breakup, after you have a relationship that ends and you're like, oh, maybe this area of my life may be required. Maybe I was a little bit more childish here than I thought I was, more than I thought I was. And it now requires our attention. And this is from the book, Boundaries in Dating. And this is such a good quote, like download it into your brain, okay? It says, this is very important rule in dating and romance. To be happy in a relationship and to pick the kind of relationship that is going to be the kind you desire. Someone read that end for me. You must, what? Okay. So to have a good relationship, you must be happy with that one. Okay. To have a good relationship, to have any kind of intimacy or real depth in your life, you better be happy being a person that's whole, that's an individual, that knows your own interests and dislikes, who is like happy with who they are, right? And is interested in something that adds and enriches. And we'll get to some more quotes, talk a little bit about that. But if you are not happy being alone, don't start dating. If you're not happy with yourself, if you're not happy with what your life looks like or the places that you're in mentally, emotionally, physically, vocationally, that is not the time to start dating. You're setting yourself up for a dating relationship that is going to be very destructive. Okay. All right. So then what should I actually be looking for when, if I'm a whole person, I am someone who's thoughtful, who's intentional about this process, who knows what I want. Okay. And again, we're assuming that there's a level of spiritual discipleship in your life. There's intentionality in your depth of knowing God. Okay. So then what should I actually be looking for? And you're going to notice that all the things that we are looking for are all the things that we ourselves should have, right? So you're not looking for something in somebody that you yourself have not developed in yourself. Okay. And I'm going to give you 4 C's. So they're easy to remember. Okay. And this is not an exhaustive list. It's just a list I made up. Okay. So I'm sure there's something missing, but I thought it would be nice to kind of give you something as a frame of reference. And the first is Christ. Okay. Is Christ at the center of this person's life? Okay. And remember how we said everything that I should be looking for in a person are things that I should have in my heart, in my mind, in my life. Okay. So is presumably Christ at the center of my life, right? So it's not like I'm just looking for this perfect person while I'm an underdeveloped, immature person, right? So is Christ at the center of this person's life? And I love this quote by Father Tom Hopko. He's was a priest in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Okay. And he says, if God is not at the center of a relationship, that relationship will fail. And I love his reasoning and rationale for it. He says, because no human being can bear the burden of being someone else's everything. Okay. No human can bear being someone's everything. So if Christ isn't everything for you and you are looking for somebody to be everything for you, not only is that person going to disappoint you, but you yourself are going to disappoint this person as well. You are going to just, again, find yourself in a very destructive pattern. So we always want to talk about what that means. And I'll share a little bit about like dating out of our own fullness, out of our own place of security and comfort level and knowing, again, who we are. But does this make sense? Like, does this make sense why it's important? Because then you're looking for someone to be something they physically cannot be, mentally cannot be, spiritually, relationally cannot be for you. So the second thing is character. Okay, now remember, we said everything that you're looking for in this person, what are you doing? You are also developing these things in yourself. Now, like, I want to also say that it's not like when you talk about someone like having Christ at the center of their life or having character, all of these things, it's not like, okay, so I was talking to Maria earlier as we were walking, like I got married really young. Okay, I was 22. Okay, like I was not the most mature, like person in the world. My relationship with God wasn't perfected. So it's not like, you need to score 100 on all of these things for you to then begin considering this person in a dating relationship or to consider this person as a potential partner. But like, how serious is this person about their development, about their relationship with God? Do you see the fruit of that growth? Are you seeing somebody who's like serious about those things? So I'm careful to say that like some people are like waiting for some unicorn person that doesn't exist. We don't want to do that either, but we also don't want to be careless in that process of, again, engaging in a relationship where you might be wasting your time or your energy or your spiritual investment. Okay. But it's like enough that it makes sense for you to pursue the relationship. Okay. So then what do we mean by character? Okay. And has anyone heard of Henry Nouwen, Father Henry Nouwen? Okay. So if you've read some of his books, this is one of his quotes. He says, when we, this is actually from the book that you're reading. So yeah, he says, when we approach another person, not with the desire to fill our emptiness, but with the desire to share our fullness, we can truly meet each other in love. Okay. And the way that I see emptiness, and it's not just like loneliness, like somebody who's like feels like there's a void in their life that just one person like needs to fill, anybody needs to fill, but also like the kind of character you hold, the kind of morality that matters for you and in your life, and like the pieces that make up a person, right? And so if you're somebody that values integrity, or somebody like that's really into service, or somebody who's just very kind or honest or trustworthy, like that there's a fullness to the way that this person is engaging in their life, and again, a fullness to yours. Okay. Compatibility. Okay. What do you guys think we mean, or I mean, by compatibility? So character feels pretty basic, right? Like who this person is, their character. Okay. What about compatibility? What do you think? Why would this be important? Why is this on my like you need to have, I personally think, I'll be honest with you, like I think you need to have, some people might disagree with me, okay? Because, okay, I'll also tell you, okay, this first one, technically, if you have Christ at the center, all of it could work. I'll just tell you, okay? And you can just like ignore everything else. However, I've seen really holy people still struggle a little bit, because if you want that to like, then you better be, it's like 100%, okay? But that's not always the case. Okay. So then why does compatibility matter? I think I saw a hand back there. Yeah. Yeah. And not just like, there could be some really holy, godly things about somebody that could just drive you up the wall, right? Like, okay, so my husband and I are very different, okay? And I'm like kind of like a fast person. I run into things a lot. Like it's not good. Like I'm not saying this to idolize just moving fast or whatever. But like in the beginning of our relationship, like anybody who knows my husband, Steve, like he's calm, he's centered. I wouldn't say he's slow. He's not slow, right? Because I've come to really love and appreciate, but he doesn't speed, like driving, like God knows how many times God saved me from ridiculous poor driving decisions, right? But like that would never be Steve, okay? Thank God. But I've come to really appreciate that. In some ways, there's compatibility there, right? But if that actually bothered me to the point where it's like, no, like I can't stand that, for example, and it's not something that like worked together in our relationship, like, well, that would be problematic, right? So compatibility speaks to like, not just who this person is, but who you are, and how that in between space, that dynamic comes together. Okay. Because they could be two really good, healthy things, but for whatever reason, compatibility wise, they don't work, right? Let's say like two very passive people. Okay. Two people who like, well, what if someone like literally never makes a move, right? Like you have to have somebody who initiates a relationship. And if you have two people who are like, then literally nothing is going to happen. Compatibility, right? So compatibility to me matters. Some people might not put compatibility on this list. I do, but that's okay. All right. So that's the question we just answered. What does it mean to have compatibility? And the things that you might, again, look for in compatibility might be different in what I look for. And then lastly, commitment. Okay. I think commitment is really, really important. Okay. And what I mean by commitment in this context, because we're again assessing readiness for a relationship, is being able to answer some of these questions. Is this person a mature adult with a sense of purpose, has a sense of their career? Again, like doesn't have to figure it all out. Like I didn't have all of my career stuff figured out, right? But I had intentions, I had thoughts, I had plans, I had real, again, careful considerations. Is this person financially stable, right? Like getting married costs a whole lot of money, living in a particular, hi guys, welcome. Okay, half of this isn't going to make sense, but that's okay. All right, so you want to consider all of these things that, again, promote a secure, healthy relationships. The problem is when we start without having this piece in mind, and it takes like a really, really long time to get to that place. Well, sometimes that process can, like, in and of itself become unhealthy. Now, I'll tell you, I'm thinking of two relationships that I know, two really amazing, like, husband wife duos. The one was engaged for like a really, really long time. Okay. Like 3+ years. Okay. Which to me is like a longish. Would you guys consider that a longish? I consider that a longish engagement because he was in school and she was getting their removed, but they were very intentional about that process. And they were very careful about how they were going about it. Okay. And this other couple on the other side of things that I'm thinking about, and these are people actually some of you guys might know, they got married like just months after like meeting each other. Okay. Like you'd be like, oh, like not even like started dating, like no, got married. Okay. And they are amazing and they have several kids and their kids are now getting married. Like it's good. It's all good. Okay. Now, how does that work? How does it work to be able to say, like, again, this thing over here, like just a few months in, and this other thing over here, like 6-7 years in? Okay. What makes that extreme work, do you guys think? Because that's what we're saying. Like, there's no formula to this. Okay. But what makes it work, do you think? I want your thoughts on this. Okay. Communication. Okay. Yeah. That there was a thoughtful consideration and communication as to like where things were headed and where things were going. I agree. Absolutely. What do you think? What else? How come two very different ways of dating and being together, okay, can lead to very healthy, like mature, godly relationships and to marriage? Like, I'm just curious, like, because I think a part of the lie that maybe we're kind of fed a little bit is that like there's this like perfect like you know, like you meet and you have this number of dates before you do this thing, and then you hold hands, and then you do this, and then like we have this thing, and then you get the proposal, and then it has to be like 14 months exactly. That's how long you get, you know, like between proposal and the date of your wedding. Like sometimes, I mean, am I wrong? Like sometimes we're fed that there's this formula a little bit, right? And that if you didn't start doing that when you were 23 and now you're however old, whatever, then you're the problem. Okay, so part of what I'm pushing back against a little bit is trying to understand why it could look so different for these two different couples. Okay, why? Okay. 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 So who you are, your experiences, where you're at in life, who this person is, right, that you're meeting, right? Because you can have a plan, you can have an idea, but maybe this person that you're meeting has their own thing that they're bringing into the mix and into the equation. And I think what makes it work is that these things are still there, right? That Christ was at the center of both of these relationships. They both had character and they both were like people who cared about who they were. They had compatibility, right? Like it wasn't one thought, it was like, imagine with this couple, right? The one that got married really quickly. Imagine if one of them thought it was crazy to marry somebody that, you know, you had just met several months ago. Well, there you go with compatibility, right? Like that couple ended up with another one who had a longer engagement because that was compatible. Maybe they had to work a few things out, right? And their commitment to being together and to this being something that was long-term, that was healthy, again, towards marriage, okay? That's why I think it's important to like, not just date for the fun of it, you guys, right? Like some people date because it's fun, okay? I push back on that just a little bit. Yeah, maybe you can learn a little bit more about yourself and other people, but it's also a recipe for like a breakup eventually, right? Like, I don't know how else it ends to date for fun if like you're not eventually going to break up. And there's some people that have a very easy time breaking up, right? Like there's some people, maybe it doesn't like impact, but there's some people like breakup like wrecks them a little bit and they're depressed and they're going through it. Like, and you know yourself, right? And you know the level of emotional investment that you're putting in some of these relationships. But again, know your heart and know what you're getting yourself into. Anyways, so some honorable mentions. These are some things I would want you to consider, and they are important. But I would say kind of the order of the things that I was saying, like again, Christ, character, compatibility, commitment, those are to me kind of fundamental. But family dynamics really matter, okay? Who this person's family is in terms of like their acceptance of you, like again, like in some rare cases and situations, like, you know, if someone's a family's against the marriage, it still work out, but like, it's just a hurdle, right? Like, it's just kind of a lot harder to have that healthy kind of relationship when the families are involved in ways that, again, aren't healthy. I put attraction as an honorable mention, okay? While I know many people would probably put it in the other category, because I don't want you to think like you have to like, you know, like I was going to say a not so nice joke, but so I'm going to retract that in my mind. You can be physically attracted and you should be in a place of attraction to the person that you are considering right now. What I think is really problematic is like, oh my gosh, I don't watch any reality shows, but I watched one show called Indian Matchmaking. Is anyone the Indian Matchmaker? And yeah, have you seen it? Okay, it's because I thought it was fascinating. And people on Indian Matchmaker have very like selective criteria, right, for who they want, like height, all this. And one person, I'm not bashing on anyone, but she specifically wanted like a guy with a man bun. Okay, like that was very attractive to her. And I was like, wow, that pool is really small. Okay, you are really limiting yourself. Okay, if like the only guy that's going to work out for you and that you're attracted to has, you know, a man bun. Anyways, like sometimes we get really stuck on like the physical attraction piece. And I'm not like poo-pooing on that, I promise. I think you should be physically attracted to the person that you're going to marry, but it's also one of those things that I promise you, gravity wins, okay? At some point in your life, most of you guys with beautiful heads of hair will at some point, like not all of you, but many of you will lose it, okay? And you should find a wife that still loves you, right? Because of, you know, who you are and not just the number, not the man bun, right? But your character, kind of person you are. You know, most of us will gain a little bit of weight. Most of us will lose elasticity in our skin. Like attraction is there, but I think the kind of attraction that I would hope we're thinking about is the kind that goes back to like compatibility, right? Like the attraction that you find in someone's personality and who somebody is. Like not to like overshare, but like for me, like I needed somebody who was funny in my life. Like if I met somebody without a sense of humor, like I was going to die, right? Like that was really attractive to me. So I met my husband who's low-key so funny. I was like, that's it, right? Like I want to laugh with somebody. I don't want to be in a boring house, okay? So that was very attractive to me, right? My husband did bald, okay? I still find his bald head very attractive. But if I had said, okay, like the hair, it's all about the hair, okay, problematic, okay? So I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but please, and I'll say this, like, you know who you are. You know who you are if like you're putting that too far on top of your list. You're like, man, she has no personality, but she's really cute. Like, no, just don't, okay? It really matters. Or he's really cute, but he's a jerk, okay? No, okay? I'll get off my horse. Okay. Shared interests, okay? Honorable mentions, shared interests. I think sometimes shared interests also, though I said like compatibility is a little bit different than shared interests. My husband's a computer programmer. I don't share a lot of his interests in those areas, but I'll still listen, you know, to him talking about stuff, whatever. Okay. But we have a lot of other shared interests. It's not like everything on the list has to like cross and it's like perfect, but you should enjoy doing things together. Do you agree? Yes. But is it like, do you have to have everything on the list? Absolutely not. And I put this because for me, it's personally really important, but like somebody with a growth mindset, like somebody who's not stagnant in their life, like it matters that you have somebody in your life that cares about who they are and their development, that they're going to support yours, like somebody who's not just stuck. Okay. And again, you're going to have your own kind of like experience with that as to like what matters. And that's why I put a little blank slate on the bottom there, because for you, there's going to be something on this list that really matters, right? Like there's going to be something, like I would put sense of humor for me on there, like that really mattered. Okay. But for you, maybe it's somebody who like, fascinating. It was like, this book has so many good examples. There was one person in here, two godly Christians, but one wanted like full-time ministry. He like really wanted to like devote his life to like doing something full-time. But she was active in the church, but she didn't want to have like somebody in her life that was like full-time ministry. And they thought they were going to work that out. And even though they were both, again, like good, kind, loving people, as the story goes, they entered into a relationship, got married, and they became resentful of each other because he wanted full-time ministry. She just wanted to be an active member of the church and to help and to be, again, like useful, but not for that to be their everything. And guess what? It created what? Issues. So put whatever is on your list. For him, that would have been somebody who was okay with full-time ministry. That had to have been on his list. But if something matters to you, be upfront about it. Be transparent. Be willing to, again, know your boundaries and what matters to you. How are we doing on time? Am I going way over, or we're okay? Okay. I'll try to go a little bit quicker. Okay. Oh yeah, actually, I think I'm almost done. Okay. This is a quote from C.S. Lewis, okay, from the book Four Loves. It's kind of coming back to, like, again, what matters in all of this. And he says, but the great thing to remember is that though our feelings come and go, his love, this is God's love for us, does not. It is not wearied by our sins or our indifference, and therefore it is quite relentless in its determination that we should be cured of those sins at whatever cost to us, at whatever cost to him. And so why I'm sharing this quote with you guys is because, like, we can talk about this all we want, but if we're not putting this process in God's hands, okay, if we're not being very intentional about this being something that we are like giving to God day in, day out, every minute, every hour, okay, then none of this works. Like we can concoct however many, we can add 7 more C's to our list, okay? It doesn't matter, okay? God has to be the one who is driving all of this. And that's why we want to keep coming back to him in this. And this is the last quote. And then I want to hear if you have any thoughts. I'm sharing this because I told you all I'm a marriage and family therapist. And as I started doing that work, I told you I never thought about how important relationships would be in the work that I do. And like a marriage that goes sour, or a relationship that's hard to, like, you know, untangle yourself from because it's abusive or unhealthy in some ways, is so painful, infinitely harder than doing work on like just yourself. Okay. And so this is from the book that I shared with you guys. And Dr. Henry Cloud, he says, all things being equal, a bad marriage is probably more painful than a bad single state. This isn't me saying like, be single, like never date, like be careful, like, you know, like everyone's horrible and every dating relationship's cursed and doomed. No, absolutely not. But I also know a lot of people that got married because they thought like this was the best they could do, or they were lonely, or this is what their parents wanted, or, you know, for a host of other reasons. And it always came back to a place of like, oh, now we're not just dealing with that thing that, remember, that quote we had about our emptiness. Where did it go? Yeah, like that emptiness, they found out, oh, like wasn't actually filled by this other person. What they got instead was all the problems this other person brought on to the relationship. So do you get like why that's so scary? Sometimes it's not like this other person like, oh, filled all this emptiness in you. No, they just brought their own emptiness because you weren't both dating from your fullness. You weren't both dating from a place of intentionality about your own relationship with God, about knowing yourself, where you're headed and what matters to you. And so I am done. And I just wanted to know if there was anything on your mind, if there's any thoughts, questions, pushback, if you think some of this was stupid and you want to rebel, go for it. But I really do want to hear your thoughts. But I also know we're kind of towards the end of time. Not all time, but the time of our meeting. Any thoughts? I covered it so well that you're like mind blown. Okay, my recommendation really is, okay, look at this book. The title's not hard to remember. Okay, get it. Okay, you want to be more intentional about your dating life. Okay, Boundaries in Dating is really good. It's very practical. You can skip to the chapters you want, but I do recommend it. And if not, look him up online and see some of his stuff. Thank you, guys. Okay.